Be like, we're live.
No, but I should learn how to use one.
It's an advancement. I've
And I get all the way down there by the airport. and all the way down there by the airport. Hey, Charles.
Hey, how's it going?
Maybe right over here.
Oh,
Good afternoon.
wherever.
Let's get started. It is July 9th. This is the IGA Task Force meeting. And we have some invited guests today, and we have a full house, which is great. So maybe we do a quick roll call, would you?
Julie Jacobs here. Jen Wingard. Holly is visiting. Mayor Rogan.
Mayor Rogan's here.
Sunny is
Smith.
here. Cindy is here.
Charlie is here.
Charlie is here. Wendy is here. Andrew is here. Doug is here. Martin is here. And Dave is here. And the only person is Hannah, assuming she's up there somewhere, but I don't see her yet.
Yeah, I
She
think,
was feeling under the weather today.
Okay, so she.
and I
might
thought
not be
she
here.
said she was question mark for
Okay.
today,
Okay.
anyway. So
So
we're
I-
good to roll.
We're good to go?
Let us look at the agenda. If there's any questions or thoughts about the agenda, we can have a motion on that. If we're ready to approve that or talk about it.
And it's out for you all if you.
I would entertain a motion on that.
Yeah, motion to approve as much as we can get through. A lot of this will depend on. how
A lot
thorough
of,
the
yeah,
homework
it's gonna be a tight schedule today. Does anybody want to second that motion to approve?
I'll second.
And any discussion on that? Any edits or changes, other than we know it's gonna be an almost impossible to schedule? All in favor? Honey? Was that, how many did we have there? Everybody, was that universal?
I think that was everything.
Very good. Look at us go. See, we're already doing better than last
We're on
week.
item 3 already. Look at us.
Approval of the minutes from July 1st. It was a long, complicated set of minutes, but did anybody have comments, or do we have a motion to approve those as they're drafted?
It's great to see all that data and information. That was really helpful.
Does anybody want
I'll move to approve. Oh, you move this
I'll move
time.
to approve.
I'll second it this time.
any comments, discussion? All in favor?
Yeah, I have a question, but yeah.
On the
But not a
minutes?
change.
On just all of the tables and documents that were kind of appended to the minutes. I was just curious.
Why?
No,
Why they were there?
no, not why.
Oh,
Just what the source of some of that, like, extrapolated population, and housing needs and data was, what was the source?
It all came from town sources. So a lot of it, like the density stuff that was from, Andrew did some math
Okay.
around town.
Okay,
The 2.4 people per household is kind of generally the math that they use, or 2.42, I think, or whatever it is.
yeah.
So that's where those came from, but it's all extracted from town information. The reason we put it all in there is because there's no other way for us to share information amongst ourselves other than get it in our agenda or in our minutes.
Right, yeah, that's great. Okay, so it's fresh, pretty fresh info.
Super. Did we approve
We
them
did,
then?
we already did.
Okay.
And I have noted the question and
Awesome.
answers, so we're good.
Now, the reason we rushed through that, is because we're lucky enough to have Mayor Rogan with us today. Holly and I have been Mayor Rogan and I have been in contact on this topic since the first, pitchfork meeting in the library, as it's being affectionately called. And her insight as to kind of how the whole IGA came about is really important for us as a group to understand. And while she's explained what she could to me, this is really an opportunity for her to try to help you all, or all of us as a group, understand kind of what went into the IGA, what the thinking behind it was. Hopefully I'm setting this up correctly for you. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So she's on a tight time schedule. She's got an appointment. We've got it slated for about 20 minutes for her comments and question and answers. With
And then
that,
Alabama's. Well, thanks y'all for, first of all, for all the work you're putting into this task force. I know it is a lot. And it is much appreciated by the entire community and specifically by the board. So thank you for that. And I want to start out by saying that, and Doug and I have talked about this. Most of the IGA discussions happen during executive session. I cannot disclose anything that occurs in executive session. It's a state law. What I can talk about is my personal experience and thoughts. And I can also reiterate that as the mayor, I am simply a trustee with a gavel. So there are 6 other trustees whose votes carry exactly as much weight as mine. So what I'm gonna talk to you about is my personal thought process. And I can answer questions, I'm happy to answer questions about that, but anything beyond that, I cannot answer. Any questions about that? Okay, so when I went into the IGA process, what I thought about was what we learned during the 2-year comprehensive plan process. And I was reminded, I think last night by Andrew, that there were over 5, or maybe it was Cassidy, there were over 500 online comments about the comp plan. And 100 people came to in-person meetings about the comp plan. And what I heard over and over during the comp plan process was we need more housing affordability. Now, that does not mean capital A affordable subsidized housing. That does not mean tax credit housing. What that means is housing that just people can afford to live in. And so generally affordable housing, we think about it, small a at 60% AMI, and 60% AMI right now is what, $60,000 a year?
About 64 somewhere there.
$64,000 a year. So for a single person who makes $64,000 a year, that's 60% of the area median income, and they can't afford to live in $1 million house. I can't afford to live in $1 million house. There's just no way. And so, we hear over and over and over, we need more housing affordability. We want our musicians to be able to stay here. We want our teachers to live here. We want our firefighters to live here. How can we do this? And so that was the number one concern that I took away from all of the comp plan meetings and processes, which Trustee Hamrick was involved with, which I was involved with, which many community members were, many of you were. And so taking that as a charge from that comp plan process, we went into the IGA discussions and what I'll say is that our counterparts at Boulder County are truly partners. There has been a lot of comment about Boulder County is forcing us to do this. Boulder County wanted us to do this. Boulder County is a good partner. Boulder County wanted to enable what we said that we wanted. So we worked together in collaboration with our counterparts at the county. Nobody was trying to force Lions into doing anything. And so that laid the groundwork for, in my mind, okay, what does Lions want to get out of an IGA? And when it came to considering the different parcels, my thought process was, well, we have professionals around who can advise us regarding things like fire. And so knowing that we have these professionals who would need to approve any development before it even got off the ground in terms of fire safety, I thought, okay, what's possible? Let's take a look at what's possible. Let's take a blue sky look at what is possible for our community. So that's kind of, I don't want to drone on and on, but I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you want to know anything more different.
Questions, anybody on that?
I guess one question, this is Jen when you're talking, one question is that I keep getting asked is why those parcels, but not all the other ones that are in the potential list? And so we think we answered it amongst ourselves last week, was that we had property owners approach the town wanting to annex in. So those were the ones that were highly looked at. I think David confirmed on that.
We did, yeah, and I'll tell you that at the time, I was not aware of the property owners approaching the town, just like if I had to keep up with every meeting staff had about everything, I would never be able to do anything else with my life because they're so busy. And also, it's not my purview, right? So yeah, knowing that there were property owners who were interested in potentially annexing made us go, oh, well, this could be a real possibility.
Can you, without getting into the executive session, which is my tiptoe around, can you provide any sort of thought on your opinion of how the density levels got assigned and the importance of whether those should stay or go, or the percentages of affordable, excuse me, attainable housing? Any personal thoughts you can share on those, of how those were applied or not applied?
Yeah, I'll tell you my personal opinion about it. And that is that, I looked at, okay, knowing that small areas of density within larger parcels can contribute to being able to have smaller housing units and thus more affordable housing units. A 1,500 square foot house is gonna be less expensive than a 3,000 square foot house. I thought about what would make the most sense on a given parcel in terms of density. What would be least impactful in terms of infrastructure? So if we had to lay infrastructure to a cluster of smaller homes versus more dispersed, larger homes, where could we get efficiencies in that? You know, knowing that, keeping in mind that the entire time, there is not one developer on this planet who is gonna build a development that does not pencil out for them, because that is not why they're in existence. Does that answer your question? I feel like I missed something.
No, it does, but some of it is the logic as to how we applied one set of density to one property, or one set of affordable, attainable housing to one property, and a different set of criteria on another. Somebody must have been thinking, because of this reason, this one should be 100% affordable, attainable. This one is 60% affordable, attainable, and this one's 50% affordable, attainable.
Yes, I can speak to that. So the reason why you see those different breakdowns for the different parcels, the three up north, they match each other. And
No, they
that's,
don't, actually.
I thought they were all split 50.
Two of them are 50, two of them are 25, 25. One of them is 30, 30.
Is the Connor more?
Mhm.
Okay, so the reason why is because the Connor, they have an interest in doing more affordability. So we amped up that affordability for that reason. The reason why you'll see more, on the Harkless property is because it's, there's not really, there's neighborhoods that border, but we feel as though since it's close to town, we can aggressively pursue more affordable housing. Up here, those percentages, I believe, I haven't looked at it in a while, but are the lowest threshold. And that's to try to fit the neighborhood characteristics as best we can while still providing affordability. The reason why it's more on the eastern corridor, again, we have interest from a property owner that has thought about affordability or a veterans community, but there's not neighborhoods that could be, I'm not gonna say adversely impacted, but aesthetically impacted by that development. So those percentages were to try again to set up this framework while still trying to keep neighborhood characteristics in play. And just market pressures.
Anybody else have questions?
So
Charlie?
when you guys were also determining the density and kind of the usage of each of these parcels, were you considering what the total needs for extrapolated housing needs are going through like 2035? Because this would extend into like a 10-year period, right? So if each of those parcels was actualized at the densities that are prescribed, would that provide the 150 housing units, or is that meant to be like blended with infill and things like that? I'm trying to get a sense of,
If
So-
it was done to its max, it'd be way over the projected need.
So that, again, and I said at the last meeting, the key to all of this is infill, urban redevelopment is the priority. But as I also said, sometimes you do have to develop on the fringes. So staff are not trying to put all of our eggs in the greenfield development funding. You know, I would say 90% of pursuits are urban infill redevelopment. But again, it's expensive, you know, we have brownfield issues, you have other issues that you have to work with. So sometimes greenfield development is simply more economically viable, but.
Right, yeah. Got it.
And then I'd also like to add that the other thing that I think about is the larger landscape, the statewide housing landscape. And as I knew was coming, and as we saw in the last legislative session, the state is taking the reins now when it comes to land use. And I have been at the state capitol and talked to more legislators than I can count about towns like Lyons needing to retain local control over land use decision making. I was just elected to the board of the Colorado Municipal League to continue to help advocate for that. And part of that is being willing to give a little. And so if I can go to our state legislators and I can say, hey, look, you know, we might not be doing everything that the governor would like us to be doing, but we're doing this and this. You know, that gives some bargaining leverage with our legislature. And so maybe they'll back up and maybe they'll say, hey, look, a town like Lyons, which is under 8,000 people, is already doing all of this. Let's exempt towns of that size from this law that we're talking about. So there are larger things at play too.
And I didn't answer the other part of your question, the reason, the density, and they are somewhat arbitrary, but you know, like all development costs, you have to have some sort of economy of scale. So without a certain amount of units, you can't maintain affordability. So it's what is that appropriate threshold? That's what we're trying to tease out.
So, what I hear you say is the leading issue was to put in affordable housing. And now after the pitchfork meetings, do you find that it would be reasonable to reconsider that that was the number one issue?
I'm not sure. You know, there were 125 people at the pitchfork meetings maybe, and we got over 600 comments during the comp plan process. So I'm not sure. What I can say is that I would be willing to talk to the board about a more robust public engagement process for the draft IGA.
The 600 comments for the planning, they weren't all in the same direction as the IGA, right? I mean, 600 people commented on
There were
the planning, but I know that if mine ever made it through the email, not all 600 were. Number one is grow fast.
Nobody's comment was grow fast.
Well, this is really fast.
No, but no,
If
it's
this,
not.
if this played out with the number, because a unit isn't a house, a unit could be an apartment building. So if you put,
Apartment.
An
that's what
apartment.
someone told me.
Apartment. Yeah, that's right.
An apartment building, a unit could be an apartment building.
The unit
A
is
unit.
one apartment.
Okay, somebody had said that a unit could be anything, a house, maybe it was Victoria, someone somewhere since it started, said a unit wasn't necessarily a household.
Yeah, I said that. A unit is, if it's a multifamily apartment, you have 4 units. You have one structure, 4 units.
Okay, well, I asked a couple times and you said a unit was a building, sorry about my phone, and not necessarily a household. And when you play that out, there's a lot of households on that property.
Yeah, and I'll clarify that, because I've heard it not only from this group, but in the dozens and dozens of people that I've spoken with. There's a lot of misuse of housing versus household unit. And I think Andrew's tried to, he's got it beat into my head pretty well, and so I've been trying to encourage it as well. when we talk about a housing unit, it's a place for a family or an individual to live. There could be 4 housing units in one building. A duplex would be 2 housing units. But still, when you say 6 to 12 per acre,
Still a lot.
over 5 acres, that's 30 to 60 housing units. That's a lot of housing units. That's more than twice of what we have anywhere else in town.
So here's a basic.
ADUs are
So can I
units,
address your questions and comments? So a couple of things. Yes, of course, there were dissenting comments in the comp plan process that were noted. In fact, at one point, the consultants for the comp plan process asked me if I wanted to just delete the ones that were dissenting, and I said, no, absolutely not. So those comments are, I assume, and maybe, I know Andrew's gonna talk to the consultant at some point, maybe he can verify, those are preserved. The overwhelming number of comments were what the comp plan team looked at.
Well, I was just responding, you said there were 600, and maybe that was 600 positive and X amount
It was
negative.
600
But so
total.
that's what I thought, and so, I don't know, it just sounded like there were, 100 and whatever at the pitchfork meeting, but there were 600 that were all pro. I'm just responding to trying to understand the data. I got in on this really late. I did do a few things on that comp plan, the silly map that said put it in somebody else's neighborhood, and they put it all over the place. Poor Jerry, he ended up having people want to build on his private
Not
property.
everyone did that though. You've said that a
But-
couple
but-
times.
but-
I didn't
but
put them
it
in other
did do
neighborhoods. I
that. I
put them
mean,
in my
it was
neighborhood, 'cause
like
that's where I want
all
Right,
affordable
over
that's-
housing.
that's focused.
Sandstone
We only have-
Park, it was all
comp
over.
plan
You have
exists.
the
You have me
post
for
office.
You can't relitigate
Yeah.
the comp
Okay.
plan.
So
Okay.
I
Plan
want to
is what it
address,
is.
I would like to address another issue you brought up, that
Yeah.
somehow there's the assumption that if these properties are put in the primary planning area, all the growth is gonna happen all at once, we're gonna see it all at once. I want to remind you that Apple Valley Road was put in the primary planning area, I don't know, Victoria, how many years ago?
Apple Valley's been there for at least 20 years.
At least 20 years. There has been 0 annexation in Apple Valley, even though the Apple Valley folks are apparently right now up in arms thinking that it's gonna happen imminently.
All of a sudden.
All of a sudden, it hasn't, these things take so much time, and my thought was, let's open up the possibility for some of this, knowing it has to go through the annexation and zoning process, the development agreement process, the fire process to be approved, all these different processes. Why would I wanna close off the possibility for a future that we can't foresee the circumstances that are gonna be happening in 10 years? Why would we wanna close off possibilities for folks that would make sense?
That's always been there.
Holly, if I could add in something here that might help a little bit. I know we wanted to get your impressions and I really appreciate that, but I think I just want to step back even one more step. And I think all of us went into this, and so you can correct me if this is not, not how you went into it, is that we want to have an IGA, right?
Yes.
Before we start considering what the details are, I think the town and the county both came into this realizing that our history of collaboration, the framework the IGA sets up for us as far as what are we opening the door to and what are we not opening the door to, is preferable to us not having an intergovernmental agreement. Because when we don't, all of those properties are eligible to apply.
That's right.
Right, so I think like there's a layer below, even where you started your comments today that I just wanted to get on the table.
Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate it. And just in the, I want to make sure we get the task force questions in before we run out of time. Did you have? one more
I
question?
just wanna ask your opinion on like basically specifics on how specific you are looking for our input. Like, I believe that we are tasked to be a liaison, a voice for our community. And yet we all admitted last week, we got a little hung up with, we don't have the expertise, as you mentioned, to do the fire review, the blue line review. But we can offer logical, well thought out review and explanation on what us and our constituents think. So I think, am I right in that view? that we need to kind of like get a 30,000 foot picture instead of just a 10,000 foot picture?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not an expert on fire. I wouldn't expect anybody in this room except the guy in the uniform to be an expert on fire.
Not even.
And I'm not an expert in land use, and neither, that's why we have Mr. Groen over here and Hannah, that's why we have planners. So, when the board set up the task force, my thought, and this was, this happened in a public meeting, is that, okay, the community wants more input into the IGA. What's the best way to get that without having another 2-year comp plan process? Because we just did that. And so that's exactly what we want, is we want your 30,000-foot view of what makes sense. And if there are criteria that you would like the board to consider, happy to consider that and talk that over with the board. That's what we're looking for.
And can I follow up that with I think we also are a little bit caught up in the time frame aspect, trying to get this done as efficiently and expeditiously as possible. And yet we do need to focus on both the parcel review so we can get a thought out logical opinion for lack of for transparency and non-biased reasons. And also, as Wendy mentioned last week, we have to really think about the language that goes in here. And to that point, we're probably more equipped to put more general parameters on some of these parcels, as they must meet guidelines set up by the annexation process, rather than getting caught up in the minutia of percentages.
I absolutely agree with you. And what we want is your thoughts on the bigger picture, on the bigger parcel picture. If you have time and you're willing to provide more granular thoughts, I think, generally the more input, the better. But those detailed negotiations, those detailed discussions, that's what happens between the board and then the board and our partners at the county. So, I kind of look at it like, the best thing for me personally to do is to let the experts do their jobs.
Right,
Perfect.
ask one more.
Only if Mayor Rogan has the time. She's got 2 minutes to be at her
We've got
meeting.
2 minutes.
Hopefully it's a
Let me
quick
check
one.
my phone real quick.
So the other question I keep getting in myself, big one, what kind of thought process went into gutting the 2012 IGA, all this great detail out of it, but didn't make it into this new? And I guess that's partly what this group's gonna be looking at, is comparing them to say, hey, the people liked all of this data. Right, because it answers a lot of questions.
That's not something I feel comfortable talking about.
But that's next week's agenda. So, Mayor Rogan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
I hope
Appreciate it.
you're gonna have to drive that little golf cart fast to get it.
I know. I know. Welcome to my life.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I
Um,
know. The speed cameras.
Just before we move on, Hannah, if you can still hear me, I just want to make sure I didn't cut you off there, Hannah. I was just trying to make sure we got that last question. And did you finish your thought there and what you were saying? Of course, we know we want an IGA. I think that's pretty universal.
Yeah, I really was just trying to supplement where Holly had started. So no, I just wanted to make sure, as a base level where we all began, and I wanted to put that out there so that she could correct me or not as far as where she was coming from, so.
Perfect. And as a follow-up to both that and to Hannah's discussions, I had a really good, very open, very clear conversation end of last week with Gail Case. So Hannah's supervisor, I suppose, and answered a lot of our questions. I haven't had time to put those in writing. I'll do that and submit them for either our minutes or for the next thing. But a lot of what he said and what Hannah has said through our meetings was really confirmed. And I think I have a much more clear picture about, we keep hearing this word negotiation that has happened and what that was or is, and how we maybe as a team recommend that get a little more sunshine on it so that people can see how that, what the trade-offs were. So just know that that's forthcoming. That information is going to be really important for us. So, any other comments before we try to move on?
I would like to clarify something I didn't get
Yes.
finished with the mayor.
Yeah, please.
The reason I call this rapid development is, in my understanding, we have never had 3 property owners wanting to sell. And that's why I looked at those as rapid, a little different than just Apple Valley where people are not clamoring to get annexed.
Yeah. And I think another question, certainly for the board that plays onto that, is we haven't heard, and maybe you can comment on this a little bit, Andrew. We haven't heard about the consideration that's gone into the cumulative effects of what would happen if these different parcels were developed. So the north side's the easiest because they're close proximity, right? Any one of them has its own challenges, and we'll spend some time on that. But any 2 of them together would really have some significant challenges from specifically a health and safety standpoint, fire, evacuation, those sorts of things.
Most people who are trying to sell a property don't want to wait 10 years. So
Right.
that's why I feel like this is happening potentially rapidly as compared to the past.
Right. I think that's a good point.
Doug, I'd like to respond to that. Some of those folks have been waiting over 5 years. They
Yeah.
were waiting for the IGA to come back open to even be eligible to be put into the primary planning area. And so, and then we had COVID and all those things that just kept getting pushed back. So I know, I can totally appreciate that it looks like it's rapid. I think if you were to ask any of them, some of them would say we've been trying for years.
Yeah, I didn't so much mean rapid in the past, but everybody's up and ready to sell their land. And so it's not like Apple Valley where there's been this huge bunch of land that people were saying, please annex as soon. It is different than I've seen
Well, no, I'm just saying
before.
that they would have been gradual,
Yeah, yeah.
but they've all waited till this process happened.
Charles?
One thing I've really taken away from this conversation, which has been really interesting, is just how many safeguards and stopgaps there are in place. In the event that even a property owner chooses to go through the annexation process and chooses to sell, they still have to find a buyer, they still have to get through the process, they still have to find a development plan that pencils out that actually makes the money. And frankly, for the amount that some of these sellers are asking for, there's no way unless they put in some kind of high-end, super luxury estate or something. And even that for developers at this point in time would be really, really risky. So I don't see there be so much concern as someone who is in this space. I don't see there being a concern for rapid, without off the rails development happening, like what happens in the plains or whatever, instantly, especially with such an intentional, community that's looking at this and such an intentional annexation process. So I just wanted to, bring that, point into the mix.
Yeah, I do understand that. It's actually, for me, it's not the map, it's the language in the new IGA.
Mhm.
It's the requirement
Mhm.
for, say, medium density. And then when you see what they put as what medium density is in the agreement, it's for that area, not at all medium. So it's really the language
Mhm.
more than the map for me. That when I put it all together, it doesn't look great.
Yeah.
So we'll
It
cover
looks
the
really
language
different
next week.
anyway.
Yeah.
Good question on good comments. I think they're both spot on, very similar to what Julie said last week, I think. The next agenda item, and I don't know if we have it. I think, Andrew, you guys were gonna try to collect just some written comments from both fire and utility on, do we have anything there, or is there anything that we want to receive and review on that?
So fire is here and can speak to that. I'm kind of waiting. So we want to use the same spreadsheet as you all.
So there's no new data you're presenting to us, so let's skip over that
But
item.
we-
And
No, it's just because we couldn't get a red, yellow, green from
Did-
fire. They wanted to make some comments about that.
If
Sure.
I may, sir.
Yeah.
So
there's some things that we look at when you, the town, send us a piece of property that wants to do something on it. Whether it's a single family home, multifamily home, or commercial type information. This is nothing new. I think the town has been used to us saying, even when someone in town is putting in an ADU, we always look at two things right off the bat. Do we have access and do we have water? So as you look at annexations of property, we're gonna be looking at, let's say you bring in a piece of property and they wanna develop it. We're gonna look at access, we're gonna look at water, we're gonna look at how long does it take to get from our station to that piece of property. And we're also gonna look at what effect, if any, it might have on a wildfire occurring in or outside the community. Does it need mitigation based on the particular development that's gonna occur? If someone's gonna come in and put a single family home in the middle of a highly forested or vegetation area, that presents some concerns for us. And last but not least is in terms of evacuation. What you have now in the community, and when you add to it, what kind of effect will it have in terms of if we had to evacuate, if the town had to evacuate, how hard is that gonna be? And let me just say this about evacuation, and this is the discussion we had this morning, is that as we go through and redevelop our community wildfire protection plan, we're gonna be looking at adding in some what we refer to as trigger points. So those points are things that we look at before we take the next step, okay? So if the fire is coming in from the west, at what point in time do we start moving people from the western portion of the community out? You can't start evacuating the east before you evacuate the west. And so those are the kinds of things that will have an impact on it. So when, as Victoria indicated, whether it's a green, yellow, or red, right now we would say just plain right off the top, a yellow. And then once we see what the thought process is in bringing that in, then we would try and assign a different color to it. I think the important thing for you is what is the plan for those people that are wanting to annex into the town? Is it, do they own is it a home on the piece of property and they want to come in? That's one thing. If this is a bare parcel of land, then what is the thought process for that individual or entity or company, whatever? What is their thought process? Are they gonna looking at single family homes, which you talked about density? Or are they gonna be looking at something that has to do on a commercial level? And I think that's, and I won't go any further than that. That's a whole other discussion. Homes versus, commercial. So, but yes, I hope that kind of paints a picture for you guys,
Yep.
as you look at it.
Any follow-up questions from anybody on that?
To make sure, so what I'm hearing is, you can't really pose an opinion on any of these parcels, because you don't know what people are proposing to develop. And once you have a proposal and a parcel and something you can actually say yes or no to, you'd pose an opinion, but to say right now, red, yellow, green, doesn't make sense, because it's in a vacuum.
Right. There's only two things that we could comment on right now. How long does it take for us to get there? And is there a interface problem? Wildland. Those are the two things that we could comment on right now. But that may be immaterial based on what's gonna happen to the property.
Right.
That interface problem may go away.
And we see that already, because we've already been questioning that before we even get to you. We've already looked at properties and we already know what issues are with that. And so we say, well, why do you, we don't even need to talk to you, because we know before we even get to you, you're gonna say, hell no.
I wouldn't go that far, but
Well,
you know what I'm, you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying, so.
Sure. And you guys you're just another one of these stopgaps that we're talking about, right? So you guys can veto that annexation. If you're like, this is gonna be a problem for the community, you can say,
Here's what we
No.
would, here's what we would say. Based on our evaluation and this, and this, we would recommend that, you reconsider that.
Okay.
But we have no power of
That's a problem.
anything having to do with that. So,
Okay.
but we'll give you our thoughts.
Yeah.
And then it's still up to you. It's still your decision, or the town's decision. Yeah.
All right, one last question, then we'll move on.
Do you offer recommendations to, changes to, that would help make it more viable?
Well, it depends on what their plans are. And obviously, the infrastructure is gonna play a big role in that, the access and the water. So certainly we can give you some thoughts along those lines, but, yeah.
So if a developer came to you and said, this X plan, but you said, well, the access needs to be changed.
Yeah, we do that all the time.
Yeah.
We did that on the Summit property, you know, they weren't gonna continue that road around. We said, that's not gonna work for us.
Right, exactly.
And so those are the kinds of input that I trust that the trustees and the town are looking for as they look at some kind of development coming in.
Very good.
And you had, I'm sorry, and we'll finish fire and then I can speak a little bit about utilities. 'cause it-
Any last things? Thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. And we might reserve the opportunity to come back with more questions at some,
Please,
before we're finished with
yeah,
this
just let me
project.
know. I'd be more than happy to.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Utility.
Yeah, and speaking with Aaron, and once we have this spreadsheet, I'll let him rate himself, but at first brush, it's, you know, through utilities perspective, most of these are greens or yellows, because the potential is always there. You know, so it's not that the developer can't put in the infrastructure to get there. So it's hard to label these as red, because there is potential there. But once we have the spreadsheet and you all agree how it looks and works, we'll give that official input.
I know, I mean,
Question about that.
well, let me ask this, because maybe this will frame your question. About 3 times in a row, we've had different people have asked different questions about utility. Are there specific questions that
Mine specifically.
we need to forward?
He can weigh in on. So I used to be on the fire department here,
Okay.
and I also have a fire engineering background just in the industrial world. So sprinklers, right? So if you're putting in a big building up above the blue line, and you're required to put a sprinkler system in the apartment building.
It
depends
on what it is. If it's commercial, it depends on what the commercial business is that would require it to be sprinkled. And it talks about what they're doing and or square footage. Residential is a given. We have that in the code. The town has ratified that adoption of the International Fire Code, and that does require sprinkler systems for 1 and 2 family dwelling units.
Yeah, and that's new for a lot of the old timers here in
Yes, it
Lyons, and
is.
I've been here over 20 years, but that would be one that, hey, well, when I was on the fire department, we had houses that are not technically in the town of Lyons that we couldn't turn our trucks around. And we would talk to the homeowners, and we'd have them put more water cisterns in or whatever. But the sprinkler thing, when that came just recently, in the last few years, that's a bigger one, right? Because you gotta have the water pressure, you gotta have the water.
Right.
And that could be a red. To me, that would be the one utility that would be like, maybe that would be physically impossible. I don't know.
But again, through the development plan and subdivision process, town staff nor the district would ever be able to sign off on a project that could not properly suppress itself in fire. So, you know, again, I think we need to, as a group, not we, you all need to understand when these checks and when these boxes occur in this development process. And it's hard to answer these questions at annexation level, because there's nothing to analyze at that point unless there's a development plan that's following, which doesn't often happen, sometimes it does.
Anything else on utilities that we want to follow up on later? Not necessarily right now. Nope, we can take that one off. Next item number 6 was, I think there were some questions, and I apologize, I don't remember exactly what the question was, but related to receiving just a brief verbal update related to any of the annexation around the east corridor, I guess mostly the Tebow stuff. Is there, I think people wanted to know kind of what's news there and what we should be thinking about, or anything we should be thinking about.
Yes, I don't know if that property is really in the purview of this group, but as far as an update goes, Tebow has purchased now 3 parcels. One is going to maintain likely in the county, and so we had put the annexation process on hold. But we will be kicking that off again. But again, just want to make it clear, there's a concept plan that's been submitted, but there's no tenants, there's no real hard development plan. So it's a straight annexation at this point to establish the zoning. And really that's it.
Is that, I can't remember who asked that question last week, so I'm sorry. Does that answer? Does anybody have any other questions?
That might have been my question. I was just kind of curious about it wasn't really the Tebow properties in general, but I was like, he's gonna be busy.
Yeah.
But it was more pertaining to just general, what's going on out there. There's 2 properties on the north and south side, Tamburello, I guess. Some gentlemen people that own a corner in town here that are already in process of being developed, and then that one that was just mentioned, and just to get a general feel for what is being planned or already ongoing.
Yeah, and on the heels of that annexation, we have 2 other property owners that are kind of waiting for that 1/6 continuity. So that you just kind of build this thing as you go. So it's kind of the linchpin in that annexation process.
On the other side of the highway also?
The Timberellas, they're redeveloping. Victoria, you might be able to speak to
Sure.
that a bit more.
At this point, my most recent update from them, and they are actually they're giving an update to the board Monday night on both of their properties. So you might want to listen in on that, or we'll bring it to the next one. But my understanding on the south side is, after going through some painful stream bank issues with the neighbor, they have acquired quite a bit of stream bank frontage now. So they are kind of shifting their plans to probably be more of what they call kind of a base camp model, where people can camp down along the river, a few RV camp spots, and then they're demolishing most of the structures, but keeping the historic one. And then that would become kind of the, what do you call it, kind of the clubhouse of the campground on the south side, at least for the short term. They don't want to invest in a ton of infrastructure at this point, because the north side of the property, right in front of the town's public works, they do have plans for a mixed use of small craft maker space with living units above them. And then I think Tebow has also reached out and said, I'd be interested in even more land, so who knows,
More central.
I know.
Yeah.
So, kind of up in the air on that side, but they definitely feel, and we do too, everything directly along the highway needs to be commercial. If you're gonna live there, you'll know how noisy it can be. Yeah. But plans for more housing type issues behind the frontage commercial.
Yeah.
But he's giving an update on Monday night.
Can we go, can we get a tour of that over there?
South side?
Yeah. Can we get over there?
Is that Phillips property?
that you're talking
No,
about?
no, it's Tamburello's.
Tamburello's.
It's
What,
the
I-
old water treatment plant.
Oh, okay, all right.
He's getting.
On the south side, I mean.
Yeah, you've seen a lot of work down there.
Okay.
They're moving a lot of dirt and getting ready to
Oh, yeah, I
demo.
saw that.
I mean, it's a pretty big piece of property. It's
It's a
larger
big
than
piece.
we think it is.
Oh, much larger.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could share a map if you want, but it, yeah, they have found out that the river was moved after the flood, and so when they put it back where it's supposed to be, they gained some really nice land.
Nice how that works. Awesome. I think we're good. Shall we move on now to the
Yeah,
the main meat and potato?
I just wanted to put a bow on that by saying, I think it's important for us again to get a big conceptual view of what's going on out there in order to look at what might be possible in other parcels. That's
Right. Cool. We have a couple of different ways that we can go about this next section, and it's really, I think we're trying to get to a couple of things. Mostly, we're trying to get to, do we have some general consensus on what the criteria should be? My thinking of starting more specific parcel related was kind of based on what Martin had said is, I feel like we need to kind of go through them to see where we have alignment and where we don't, and kind of figure out how we're looking at these different parcels. And then try to boil that down to something workable, if that makes sense. I'll share my screen if I can. And then, do I need your,
No, you're good. Let me, I'll stop share. I don't think I'm sharing.
Victoria, and I'll put this together, or which one of you two put this together? This was kind of based on my paper, yes, last week. I guess technology is better than paper, I get it. I'm old school. But this was sort of a starting point of trying to do the same thing that I had tried to lay out on the flip chart, with listing all the properties across the top. And then sort of down this other side, list the things that we think are relevant. So a lot of these are indeed things that are captured in the annexation process. I think it's incumbent upon us that we need to give direction to the board to think about what's being changed in the IGA. Why is it being changed? We know that the 2012 IGA was a very deliberate process, and a lot of thought went into it. We know the world changed after the flood. We know our requirements have changed, but I still think it's important for us to look at the individual properties and task the board with looking at it and saying, should this be changed on the map? And then certainly the annexation process takes over from there. So one approach is to just kind of walk through this. Another approach is to look at sort of that homework assignment that we talked about last week that I articulated after the meeting, of going through each property and kind of what are the pros and the cons? Where do we have agreement that focus should be, or do we have any agreement at all? And kind of go from there. So what's the consensus of how you all would like to do this? Should we start with sort of the pros and cons and see where that is, or should we kind of try to start jumping right into criteria?
I would say we stick with criteria and limit comments, because if your comments are gonna be pros and cons, we should get to them at the end,
And say that.
or we'll never get through it.
That's fine. Anybody else feel differently on that? No? If you do, speak up. Now's the time. Everybody's got a voice here. So if you feel like we should take a different approach.
I mean, again, all this stuff is kind of moot, in a sense it's going to be looked at by.
I agree completely. I think
It's-
it's a
it's-
lot of
it's-
time spent
Yeah.
saying, follow the annexation process, follow the annexation
Yes.
process,
Well,
follow the annexation
it
process,
doesn't
follow the
matter.
annexation process.
It
It's
just doesn't
all
matter.
already going to happen.
Yeah. So we
We
Yeah,
talked
we
about this
said-
last week. and
we did talk about it last week, and we also
Yeah,
talked about
also-
last week that the recommendations we're gonna put forward, that we agree to put forward, will be recommendations, and every recommendation will have an opportunity for dissension view. And I know, Julie, you were very clear that all the property should remain on there. Maybe you believe that everything in the IGA should stay the same, and I think that's perfectly acceptable. And that's fine. I think there's lots of other of us, I think there's several of us, that feel like it's meaningful. And so I would say for those, we should go forward and you guys
Can
can
I just
provide
push back?
your
This,
dissension
my
view.
statement here has nothing to do with, I think everything should be annexed. My statement here has to do with the fact that there is a process that already looks at all of these things, and we are wasting our time by saying essentially, board, for the Connor parcel, we want you to make sure the annexation process is followed. Board, for
But
the
it's-
Carpenter
but it's
parcel,
not-
but that is,
Well,
okay,
maybe
so-
I'm not articulating. Let me try to articulate it. We went through the annexation process. I think the annexation process is good because it's a safety net. It's extremely costly, not just in dollar cost. And I know you can disagree with me if you want to, that's fine. But it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy for the board, for the PCDC, for the community, for staff. And it can be very divisive in the town if there's parcels that clearly, the board decides clearly don't make sense. I think they should consider not having those on the map. To take rural preservation and to put high density housing, I think is a very controversial thing. That's why we have this task force. We're not here because we just decided that would be fun to get together. We're here because there was a lot of people that spoke up. There were a lot of people from across the town, not just the north side, that said, if this IGA passes, we will do a referendum to recall it. And so we've been assembled to provide input. If you don't want to provide input, that's totally cool. You don't have to, but I know I, for one, have input.
You're missing the point,
What's the
because
point?
you're saying that we're putting this, draft IGA together and saying what you think it should be, but it doesn't have to be that. Like you think that just because it says what it says means that that's what it has to be. That's not what it has to be.
It's what it says it has to be.
What, yeah.
I mean, literally in the document, it says it has to be X parcel at least.
If that
this to this,
owner,
and this is what it is.
that property owner wants to do that,
If they
that's
want to
what-
annex it in, then it
that-
has to be done that way.
it doesn't have to be high density. It doesn't have to be housing. It doesn't have to be whatever. It's help me out here.
Well, that was put in there to create leverage in the negotiation
Exactly.
with the ownership. So
But
it
Right.
was.
It's not,
But
it's a legal
It
binding
says it
contract.
has to
No.
be, to develop it and annex it, it has to be.
Thank
Nothing
you,
changes.
thank you.
You don't have to do what says in there.
Could just annex and do nothing.
It is
for the
not
next
saying
50
that you have to do
It's just saying, if you want to do
This.
housing,
If it's
and it's a
housing.
multifamily housing, it must have some levels of affordability included in
And to
it.
clarify, it's also a starting
Not
point
some-
for negotiation between the
Correct.
town and the ownership. So it's not even like,
That's not,
direct-
that's not
That's not what it
true.
reads,
That's not correct.
that's what's been
It's true.
communicated to me. So
It is, we heard on the day one, it is a legal document. It supersedes all the other documents that this town has in terms of land use. If we were, like, why are we here if we're not reviewing the
I was
IGA?
gonna
I don't
ask
understand
David
the
to please
question.
tell us
Wendy, help me
that.
out.
Because you're hung up on a map.
Well,
I
so,
think
so
Yes.
on a
I'm gonna
document.
look to
Who's
Victoria
hung
for
up on
some
that?
I have
help.
no idea
Everybody.
why I'm here.
I mentioned this last meeting, I sent an email to the town attorney asking him to clarify this.
Yes.
And I haven't seen a response back, so I sent him another note yesterday going, hello, can you provide some input? Because I think we're gonna arm wrestle with, if you read the IGA, it's very specific, the draft IGA. And then can you lock a potential, homeowner into those specifics or not? And so I'm hearing both sides of it. I don't know, that's why we need the attorney to weigh in.
Andrew,
So,
Andrew, didn't you present early on when you gave that kind of highest level overview of what the IGA is, that the purpose of that document is to create a lever or a negotiation foundation for future conversations? Or is it actually like a manifest that says in the event that an owner wants to annex this piece of property, they then need to follow the requirements that have been set out in IGA for affordable housing density, et cetera? What is the answer from the
So-
planning.
Charles, you were correct in saying that the intent, maybe it's not reading correctly, and that's what needs to change. The intent was to be able to use leverage, that if someone wants to do housing, there has to be an affordability component.
Right.
And so you can't, we're not just annexing in to build more $1 million homes. We are wanting to make sure that the priorities of the community as identified in the comp plan was we add some diversity to our housing.
Right.
And that was it. But it's not one.
Okay, and if it's not worded right and you
We're
feel
gonna-
comfortable, then
Yeah,
Well,
I,
there's a lot of shells in this document. which
So,
just leads you to-
wasn't today supposed to be the map and then we work at language later? So
Okay.
could today be
well,
Yes.
I mean, we can,
and then language later, or do we do?
that's
language-
what we were supposed to do the map today. We all agreed. I sent the agenda, you thought it captured our notes. So what we were supposed to do was talk about the parcels. And for people that don't want to talk about it, like, I think that's fine. You can sit quietly. But I think there's some of us that don't believe that all these parcels should be on there. The other big topic that came up that I think we said we wanted to discuss today was, do we agree right here and now that let's take the density specifics out, let's take the affordability out, and if anything, we put it as a blanket over the whole IGA, but not on specific parcels. I think there was some mixed feelings about that, but maybe that's a starting point in the properties.
Yeah, it does. It seems like the map is being controlled by the density, at least from a few perspectives. So I think it's important. Let's look at the map and let's address the map, because I don't know, I can't speak for anybody in this room, but I don't think most people would have a problem if somebody bought the Boone property for $5.2 million and built a large home on it and then annexed it in. I don't think that's what at least that's the sense that I got from the community meetings. It's about the density.
Mhm.
So I don't want the properties and the potential to annex for, a water tank or utilities or something to get thrown out because of the fear of the density. I think the density portion should certainly be addressed. And as I mentioned at the last meeting afterwards, it might make sense to strip all of the language away from the individual parcels and then just cut it across the board. If you're developing housing on these parcels, pick a number. 10%, 12% has to be affordable and attainable. And I think that gets us where the comp plan goals were. That gets us to where the county is comfortable in this partnership of securing housing. And I think it takes care of some of those density fears.
Yeah.
But please don't lose the map because you're worried about density. Provide a recommendation of both.
So before we take your question, Charles, does everybody agree with that statement?
I like that.
And
Right.
not just density.
Kind of like
So, bear with me.
Yeah.
And the same thing I think applies to the affordable attainable housing.
Yeah.
Because really arguably, it's a double-edged sword for a property owner.
Yeah.
The Boone property is a great example. It would be really hard to build that level of density and that level of affordability in that property because it's expensive to start with.
Yeah.
And it's there, but maybe it's a spot where maybe it does have more commercial application. Maybe it does have a different, some residential and some commercial. Maybe it's commercial and then maybe somebody builds a house on the backside, but
Yeah.
do we have, like, by show of hands, how many people think that density data should be stripped off of each property? Anybody?
But applied in some broader directive.
So let's just, let me see hands, so we know how we have, do you agree that,
As long as it's then applied in some broader directive as.
Martin, is that?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I just wanna see so we
Wholeheartedly
can,
agree with that.
well, let's have a discussion, because some people don't. So Julie, you don't, so help us understand, like,
I
let's,
feel like there needs to
this is,
be.
let's have open dialogue
something.
here.
But, okay, again, I just wanna say we're getting away from the map and we're getting into the language, which is fine. I think that there should be some accounting for density requirements. I do not think we should allow $1 million home to be built on the corner parcel. So I think that how it's worded right now might be problematic, but I do not think we should remove it completely from the IGA. That's just one person.
Anybody else? You thought it maybe should be, let's just do a
Well,
quick round.
Yeah,
round
so
robin.
my thing going back to the beginning of time is when you were dictating to property owners what they can do with their property. And they want to sell to Sting to build his bazillion-dollar home in Lyons, why would we say no? I guess if it was, especially not.
So yes to removing the density
I would
requirements?
say remove it from the specific parcels, because I've always questioned why we're listing specific
But not
parcels
from
in
the
the
IGA
IGA.
itself, just.
No,
from
right,
each
we
specific-
write in
okay, so
other-
that's two different questions.
So, but if I may ask, if it's just going to Sting, why annex into the,
You wouldn't even
the
annex.
town anyway?
Because
So-
Victoria said she wanted the taxes off of it.
Right, we did say that. We said, why would we ever stop that process?
But as the landowner,
It's the landowner.
as the landowner, if I want to build a 800,000 square foot house or whatever ridiculous number, what's the point of me going through this process?
Maybe
Why,
Pain in the ass.
you
you might
know,
be wanting to build a water tower and have public water or something like that.
Yeah,
I
maybe
mean, I don't
Sting
know
wants to
if
help
I
us
was
with their
that
water
rich,
issues.
maybe.
every step
Pretty
you take.
environmental.
Obviously, you want the utilities. I mean, you want advantages of having the utilities and having
utilities.
the sewage and what have you.
Yeah, but we're talking about Sting, he can afford it.
Or he
I mean,
want-
right? Cause that's.
He wants
that
to
was the
build an
question.
amphitheater back there where the pond is, right? And let it
Andrew.
be open to people.
And
Who
wants to
knows?
have public utilities,
But obviously, I mean, getting back to the serious point, guys,
yeah.
but going back what you're saying, Victoria said a couple of weeks ago, when we're talking about taking people on the task force, off the task force, density, not density, whether we're looking at, how we're looking at planning things, and whether we're putting people red, green, yellow, on or off. We need to look at how we're moving forward and not wasting time, and looking at how we're gonna actually lead people on and move forward, because we're really holding ourselves back with a lot of what we're doing. We need to just go ahead and say, okay, how are we just gonna go ahead and move forward with how we are planning some of these things? Because we know for a fact that some of these things are gonna go ahead and move forward. We know there's some hiccups. We know there's some stumbling blocks. We know that, that there are a couple of properties, there's no way they're gonna get developed anytime soon, maybe in the next 20 years. There's no way they're gonna be multi-complexes, or there's gonna be a bridge put there, or there's gonna be anything that's gonna mitigate what's going on life-wise. But somewhere down the line, whether technology, AI, something for 50 years now is gonna happen. So you cannot quite take them off. So we have to leave them on just because something might happen in the future. So why are we fighting about whether we take them on or off?
Because I think there's some that some people feel are clearly not suitable for development. And there's the issue of if we're changing something that the Boulder County, and this is one of the things I talked to Dale Case quite in depth about, Boulder County went out of their way and to really protect and defend some properties. And we as a town went out of our way to call properties rural preservation. If we're willing to take those off the map and develop them, significantly develop them, not one house, but significantly develop them, what prevents us from taking other ones off the map down the road? And that is the fear. That's why you wonder why Apple Valley came out of the woodwork. It's not because nothing changes on the map for Apple Valley. Zero changes. And they know that, and they've been informed that.
So is Apple Valley in an umbrella?
No,
No,
they're
no,
yellow,
it's
but
just
they're
there's
not on,
nothing's changed.
nobody's selling in a big way right now.
But the question is, some people feel, I personally feel that changing a rural designation, a rural preservation to quite high density development is wrong for a lot of reasons on some properties, not all of them, some of them. There's a parcel on this map that nobody's ever talked to the owner. It's next to the Carpenter property. It is not the Carpenter property. It was changed from rural preservation to developable space and then marked as not to be developed. Why?
Why?
Why was that done? Because it made the map look a lot better and made Carpenter look a lot smaller. So I think it's wrong to suggest that we should just rubber stamp what's on the map, I believe. If I'm alone on that, then fine, I'll be the one dissenting opinion. But I believe we have an obligation to at least look at what was changed on the IGA document and what was changed on the IGA map and voice an opinion if we have it. And if we don't have an opinion, we don't have to voice it. I have an opinion and I'll be voicing it either alone or with the group, however it comes out. So, you know, I think on these density things, which is where we were, if we have a consensus, let's reach it today and get that out of the way, because that's a big part of the argument of the map,
Let's do a CC, a Christopher Cross. I'd
right?
like
Does
to
that
win.
make sense? Does anybody not understand that or want to challenge it?
You
or-
don't like my analogy?
I think we can agree to have more, we can't have a specific parameter at this point, but I think we can agree that we need more general parameters that apply to all the parcels. My question is, if we don't go through each parcel because it might be time consuming, how is the process gonna work? What do you see? How do we get from the point A to B? What are we here for?
I think that we
Do we just go
can,
right into writing or something?
I feel like the map is such a different thing than the words. And if we're breaking this up into two things, can we just agree that everything on this map might someday possibly be annexable? And then look at the words to say what those requirements would be. I agree with Sunny that because we think today something doesn't look developable, doesn't mean it's not developable in 7 years. And are we going to hamstring ourselves by saying no instead of maybe? We're not saying, yes, this is gonna be annexed. We're saying maybe this is allowed to be, they are allowed to apply to deal with this incredibly onerous and expensive process. I feel like today we should be able to say yes or no, just on that really super, like, high level, what whoever just said earlier, the fire chief, or whoever, somebody said, we want high level. So at the highest level, are these parcels things that in the next 10 years potentially could be considered for annexation? I could, right now, I'd say, vote on it, yes or no. And then let's get in the weeds on the language and the density and the affordability and blah, blah, blah. That's a different conversation. The first conversation is maybe or no.
Yeah, that's what,
Okay,
right. That's what-
well, we
and Doug and I
we
both
can
agree.
try that. We can try that, and I'm happy to be the descending. You
Okay,
wanna do
I
it
would like
as
to
a-
move that we vote right now on whether we include all of these parcels as on the map. And then we look at all of the rest of it next time. But I'm gonna make that motion that we vote to say, yes, maybe, meaning, yes, these can be on the map to all of those parcels. And if there's a second, great, and if not, great. Okay, there's a second.
Okay, all in favor of that motion?
Okay.
So that was,
So done.
that was,
I'm just gonna
just,
abstain.
so that was Julie, Jen. Sonny, you voted on that?
Well-
All parcels remain on the map.
Oh, is that the vote that just
That's
happened?
That's the vote that just happened.
Let's go back
All
again.
parts.
Say that again.
So let's slow down, so everybody listen, because this is the right approach. I think Julie's taking. And I don't care how it comes out, because my opinion is gonna remain the same. What she's saying, if you look at the map, all the parcels that are designated for possible annexation we should rubber stamp that and send it back to the board as it is.
Rubber stamp is a little bit, I don't know, that has some.
But you
Is it
don't
I
want to
am
change
saying,
Is
no,
it
we've
general
talked about it.
GA?
I'm not rubber stamping it. We have spent a long time here thinking about it and talking about it.
Discussing.
Rubber stamp would have been
There's
day
not-
one,
yeah.
yes. Now here we are after
Okay,
many hours
So
of conversation
rephrase your,
to
and listen to
approve the current map that is in the draft IGA, not to rubber stamp it, to approve it after a lot of discussion and good faith consideration and talking to the community.
Yeah.
That's better than rubber stamp, in my opinion.
What, just a question though, like,
Yes.
would that also include making changes to the language?
Yes,
Such
that's
that-
next.
We're not
More
allowed to talk
intentionality.
about that.
We're
yet.
just talking
We'll
about the
take the
map.
map as it's fine with you.
Problem
I just-
with that is.
I just wanna like clarify that.
Support.
That's an important point.
There are changes.
Because there's some things on the map that have some doubts. And Doug and I had one time, between ourselves, had talked about looking at the map and going,
That was.
Red
we
line.
talked about today.
yellow line, green line. Saying, and the map was saying, there's no question, even though we might not develop it now, But if we looked at the picture right this second, there's 2 or 3 parcels that we definitely say red.
Right.
There are probably 80% of the parcels that we say
Yes.
100% green.
Annexation.
And then there's say 2 or 3 parcels that would say yellow.
Right.
And those yellows would be, say, like within 5 years or maybe 7 years. But the greens would be something that would happen immediately. But 2 of those parcels that would be red would probably be parcels that would say, they might be red, but that's probably parcels, those probably 2 red parcels would probably be something that people would probably look at 15 or 20 years from now. But we possibly still would say red. But so when we're talking about her saying, raise our hands to say, let's look at all of them at one time. Yes, but there's language and there's things that need to be adjusted. We're not just saying, hey, we didn't come to this meeting and raise our hands after 4 or 5 weeks and just saying, hey, we're just agreeing to everything, just get it out the way. No, we're not doing that.
Right.
We're just saying, we're just kind of, this is what we're trying to do. Okay, so there is some reasoning for language, there's some reasoning for understanding of what we need to put in there. I'm trying to make it as common and as simple as possible.
Sure.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So there's like, I'm just saying off the top of my head, 2 reds, 3 greens or 5 greens, 2 or 3 yellows in there. Okay, all right, you hear what I'm saying?
I do.
I'm not trying to be questionable like Cindy here asked me all these crazy ass questions and doing 2, 3, 5 things, okay? Okay,
Jen?
So
I'm gonna be big.
I misinterpreted your question, Julie, because my question was, one of our tasks was to look at the annexation area and say, yes, those should be in the annexation area. I think we can all agree. The question that we keep coming up with and neighbors keep coming up with is the words don't match the map.
Right.
And the old map doesn't match the new map. And the
Right.
question was, why and when
Right.
did we go from a rural preservation to no, you can't put anything on it? And then some of the ones that are listed are in the rural preservation. So why are we putting these density things about a rural preservation
Right.
area? So that's where the
So
big.
you do have questions about the map?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, going back to.
Well, I
the
think we
original
all have
question.
questions about the map, it just depends on what question.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor for the minutes, and since we're in a meeting, y'all need to clarify.
Having a
process.
discussion. We're clarifying the question. And that is, there are questions. Some people have questions about the map. And so
So the motion was to approve the map as it is and then have a continued discussion about the details. It so do we want to vote again and let it fail? I'm fine with that, but we have to vote. I just feel like we are gonna spend the next 8 hours. We're never gonna get through these parcels, but that's just me trying to speed up the process so we can get to the words, because I think that's what people are the most worried about, but that may clearly not be in the right there.
do you think we have a better chance of talking about the map if we did the words first?
Yeah, I think so. That feels like
Kind of where you
more,
are?
start with the higher level and then utilize
Is
that.
that kind of what you're saying, Julie?
I just want to get the map out of the way so we can talk about the words, because the words are what we're all freaked out about, not the map, but some of us are freaked out about the map, so that's fine, we can.
Martin, did you have an opinion?
Well, I think everybody has very valid points. I think the words are very important. I think we're getting to the point where we know we have to speak in more general terms. My concern is that if we just blanketly approve what's on the map now, then we're not considering some parcels that might be added to it, or the scenario that you mentioned with this homeowner was changed and not explained.
Right.
So I think we can work on both. I do believe that just having this discussion has led us down a path of, again, streamlining the parcel review. Maybe it doesn't have to take that long. Sonny just summed it up pretty quick, red, green, blue, or yellow. And so I think those are my main concerns. That's why I can't get behind just blanketly approving the map as it is. But I do believe that we can't get caught up in the minutia of it. That we have to move forward through it somehow, and we seem to be getting stuck on the process of that.
Yeah, if you all are in agreement, you'd have to go ahead and table your motion if you want to table it. To move and look at the document and see if that helps us clarify it. Because I think if we end up taking out or reducing or changing the requirements, I think some people are gonna feel differently about some parcels. Here's a great example, and I think it was either Julie, I can't remember if you brought it up or Jen brought it up, the Hawkins parcel.
Right.
That they're disappointed because they don't like now, they were kind of interested in annexation, but they don't now because of the requirements. I think if we
Well, and
end
their
up stripping out these
circumstances changed,
requirements,
Yeah.
they may go, hey, that sounds good, and we may all feel better about that property. Is that
I'll
moving in the
table
right
the motion.
direction?
I just think we have 10 minutes left today and we've got 2 more meetings before August. I don't think we're gonna get anywhere if we keep plodding along like this. We're having the same discussion every time.
And I'm not gonna take too much time. If we could just vote and terminate and not table, because then we're gonna have to bring this motion back
Okay, I don't
up.
even know what that means. So
Um,
vote. Okay, so
Withdraw the,
no, I
You
can't
can
table
either-
it. Let's
You can
vote.
withdraw your motion
Yeah.
second, or you take the vote
She
and move
wants
on.
But you'd like to vote, right?
I
Dylan?
don't,
Is that
at
what
this
you're
point, I
saying?
don't even care.
Right?
So do we, I
This
don't,
group's
what do you,
clearly
you
getting
procedurally,
resigned,
what makes the
I
most sense?
So we need to like kind of
Probably,
figure out. the
I
right
say we
way to
just
go
vote on the
forward.
motion.
Okay, let's vote on the motion. So the motion as it is to approve approve those parcels as potentially annexable and then to focus on language next time. And we've already got a motion and a second.
Yes.
So I'm a yes.
All in
I'm a
favor?
yes.
We have
There
2
you go.
yeses, 3 yeses, all opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm abstaining.
Okay, so
And
4,
Jen's not a voting member. So 3 yeses, 3 noes,
So
and
it
an abstain.
dies for a lack of majority.
Dies, is
Okay.
that the right word?
Yeah.
Put it in the mortuary.
It didn't fail, it didn't pass.
It just died.
It dies because there was no majority.
Makes sense.
So moving then, I don't even know how we're gonna start next week's meeting, but we'll figure that out, I suppose, in the next 10 minutes. How do you want to start? How do you guys want to tackle going through edits of the document itself?
I think we should keep the old one handy and then try to understand what the public would want back in the document to explain why we have an IGA, what it oversees.
If that's something you can second, I'm all in.
Had anybody have, like, how do we want to work through this? A group edit with 8 people is gonna be
Yeah,
tricky.
that needs to happen.
Julie, what's your?
I
what's your thought?
honestly don't know at this point. I'm not, I mean, the old one is different than the new one. How valuable is it to go word by word between the two? I'm not sure that's valuable. I would like to just look
yeah.
at the new
And that
one
works kind of
and
like
make
that.
the speech, make
Yeah,
recommendations and then bring them back here. And then maybe we can actually each present our edits. I have,
yeah.
You want to do it that way? Would that be the right?
It would actually be really interesting to try and find what the common commitments that we all have are, because I guarantee you that you and I are gonna agree on 2 out of our 10 points, and maybe, you know, there's gonna be some common thread agreement that we find and we can then rally around. And so if each of us had, you know, the opportunity to provide, you know, our top 3 most important recommendations rooted in what the town needs and wants, I think that'd be really interesting for us to then find a foundation of commonality that we can then work from. Because it seems like right now, there's enough people at loggerheads that we're getting stuck in the
So
minutia.
articulate that in a way that we can take it as a homework assignment.
each of us
Somebody-
identify our own top 3 recommendations and then present them and
Of
find
the document.
for the document. So make all your edits.
Or just kind of just in general, I mean, like, I don't know, like the idea that, you know, like based upon the ultimate thrust of this task force, not maybe based upon the specific words of the document, but like, what's the point of us sitting here? Like Mayor Rogan just really, I think, succinctly and concisely said that the reason for this and the main thrust was to provide to the community what the community needs, which is not affordable housing, but housing affordability for the people that live here and that want to live here in the future. You know, as a resident of the Confluence, as a current renter, that's really important to me. So my recommendation is going to be rooted in preserving the culture and the environment of this community that I love and my wife and baby love, but also ensuring that we can afford to live here and buy something at some point, very like pragmatically. My recommendation is to be based upon that, which is, you know, I'm not going to get to, but like, you know, I think there's people here that would have a general agreement somewhere with what I'm saying. I think we could all find that. And once we find that commonality, that thread, we then base a recommendation upon it.
Does everybody feel that if they had 5 minutes of time next time that they could present their edits to to the agreement.
Well, and it sounds like what he's saying is not so much specific edits to the words, but what is your general framework and commitment from which you are approaching this? And what are the priorities and values for you? And then where do we have common ones?
Yeah.
And then do recommendations flow from that? And we may end up with two completely different opposing sets of recommendations, which is fine.
Yeah.
It just means we all talked about this and thought about this a lot.
Mhm.
So what I'm writing here, and tell me
Yeah,
if I'm
that's-
capturing it. Each of us identify our own top priorities. What else? What
I think
other
it's
word
gotta
is
be
it?
edits too, but it is, because there is some specific wording that changed.
So the wording is.
Objective.
Priorities, objectives, recommendations.
Recommendation, maybe just say
On
top
the doc-
recommendations, maybe
top
just say that.
Top
recommendations
Maybe just say your
on the
top three
document itself.
recommendations on this.
Wendy?
entity.
I have already gone through and like made a idealistic view of what I want the town to look like in, 20 years, like what I think the town of Lyons should look like as a community, as a place that everybody would want to live. With the people in and out, with the way it was before, with the people, the sustainability of housing, with, commercial growth, and business growth. And I just kind of took the properties that were in question on the IGA and wrote a little thing about each property and what the potential was there for that property and what I could kind of see as a big picture for the town with all those properties combined. And I think that if everybody did that, it would be helpful to see, because you can look at the map and you can see how those properties actually connect on a larger scale. And that's what we're trying to do here,
Right.
is create a giant picture of 20, 30 years down the road.
So to make this actionable in the next 3 minutes, so how do you all feel about this? Because I like the way you worded it, make your edits. If we could commit, whoever wants to do their work, it sounds like Wendy's already done hers, I know I've already done my edits, I'll just clean them up. But if we could get all of those to me by, let's say Sunday night, I can attach them all to the agenda.
Okay.
So that we'd have it, you'd have it at least a day before the meeting.
Read 'em.
To read them, and then when we sit down, we each take 5 minutes to go through ours, and that's 45 minutes of our time right there. Does that?
Is that day Sunday? Is that what you said? I missed that.
Yeah, by Sunday, I mean, if you get it to it earlier, but it won't post until Monday.
I feel hardback work bad, that worked for you, all that damn work for you.
No, it's just, I'll just take your documents, I'll combine them all into one, and I'll attach them to the agenda. And then I'll do what I normally do, once we send it to the town staff, I'll send it to you guys, so you all know it's gone out.
Andrew has something I wanted to add to me too.
Yeah,
Is that
so,
something-
and I don't know how to practically do it, but if we have 8 documents with different edits, different comments, at the end, that's gonna be a huge administrative lift to combine those. If everyone in this group is wanting to make edits, make comments, it probably would make sense to set up, and we'll have to figure this out with, sunshine laws, but,
That's the problem.
Post-it note.
but.
That's why I'm thinking if they all send it, at least people could read them.
No, what I'm saying is one document with the edits and the comments,
Yeah, like
but you
the
can't be
Word doc.
doing that outside of this meeting, and that's what's hard.
Right,
Because if staff gets
we're gonna run out of time.
a 10-page document with all of these edits that we have to incorporate,
No,
that's
no,
gonna
we're
take.
not asking staff to do anything. This is for us.
Oh,
This
okay.
is a worksheet for us because we're not gonna be able to cover it in 5 minutes.
Mhm.
If you wanna get your stuff to the rest of the task force members before the next meeting, send them to me and I'll put them in the agenda so you have access to them. That's the only way I can get information out without breaking the sunshine law.
Just a suggestion that would tie this together is if we all really clarify what what we do, like if we say, instead of calling it edits, that word seems too detailed to me. three, like our top three driving recommendations, like, you know, that are probably gonna lift up, maybe they're gonna be property specific, maybe they're gonna lift above it. But if each of us came up with our three primary recommendations that we as individuals, if we had unilateral ability to just make the Board of Trustees recommendation, if we could each come up with those three, we share those via the notes, and then all of us reads each person's three top recommendations, which are presumably rooted in your community and your own individual profile's needs. Then if we all read that and with like in a unemotional way, read those and say, okay, where am I finding a commonality amongst everybody's recommendations? Okay, everybody has this one recommendation or two recommendations. Holy smokes, there's a whole bunch of similarity consensus here. Then we take that and we create that one-page simple document that is the first probably draft of the recommendation that we share. And then we build upon that to ensure that the environment is preserved above this property and the housing needs are fulfilled, et cetera. So I think that would be a way to like clarify. Yep. Bring it together.
So I'd say do it, that's the best way for you to do it. I know I've seen notes that, you know, Wendy had, and saw some notes Jen had. There's a lot of edits to the actual document that I know people want to get out. So I'd say if it's high level, go high level. If it's specific, go specific, and we'll work through it next time around, and we'll figure out what to do with the map.
Just to come full circle on the old document,
What's wrong with it?
we keep talking about housing, but the old purpose and intent of the original IGA was to make Lyons not a bedroom community.
Right.
And to become economically sustainable, it must transition from a residential development-based economy to a commercial-based localized economy. That's missing, and that's kind of important.
And if we would have gotten into the map, that was exactly my point. So when you look at the Buchanan Stone Yard property, to think that that's only residential would be a shame, because it could be so much more.
Right.
To think it should only be affordable housing would be a shame. We shouldn't create that kind of island on that. And so that's why I wanted to talk about the map and go, there's some things, but maybe if we do this document first and strip some of that out, it'll go away. So it's a little bit of a train wreck, but I think we got to the conclusion. Let's try this, let's see what we have, and then let's pick up the
Don't
pieces.
doubt yourself, it wasn't a train wreck.
Let's pick up the pieces next week. We'll focus on the document. We're still gonna ultimately want to come back to the motion that Julie made when the time is right. Maybe it's the week after that or whatever, or maybe it'll come out in the document. Does anybody have any other topics they think we should try to clobber next week, or is just one topic good enough? Right, everybody's good, right? Anybody have any final thoughts, comments before we
I'm sorry,
adjourn?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there anyone, and if you don't, if there's something about the earlier document that is not working for you, I don't understand, because it's such a great document, and I could get in a better understanding mindset about this homework, if I could, because I'm so with Jen, it's like such a great document.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't understand why we don't at least try to do this with the documents, but that's because I don't understand the opposition on that document.
What opposition?
It's not opposition, it's
Oh,
just. the
no,
old
no,
document.
okay.
We're doing a new document. I don't think the old
We
document
are.
is what it, I think that was pre-flood, that was 12 now years ago. And I don't know, I mean, I look at contracts all the time. I see lots of contracts that sequentially are not the same. That's the whole point of the new contract.
Well, I mean, you make a valid point, because Jen asked questions specifically to Mayor Rogan about why they changed so drastically, and she couldn't answer.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it does seem like a
She couldn't answer because it was
fantastic
Wasn't
document.
allowed to, yeah.
she
Yeah.
couldn't answer.
But
yeah.
without the answers, maybe we've got to revisit and answer for ourselves.
Yes.
It's a great document.
It is a
Or
great
maybe you
document.
just make a comment that these portions, make it proactive. These paragraphs in 2012, we would recommend those be
Okay.
carried
I
forward.
was just
Make it
trying
that
to,
easy.
I was just trying to
what I
understand
did.
if there's a
Victoria,
big
You were around for
opposition.
2012, right? Were you around for the?
I-
original
I was-
IGA?
We're gonna have to wrap, because I gotta get on time.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of
So that's, woo, let's wrap up then.
All right.
Unless there's anything relevant to next week, I would move that we adjourn.
Motion vote.
You
We're
were
gonna
saying
gavel.
use that word too.
I'm afraid of it.
Got a gavel.
You know what?
Yeah.
Did you break that gavel?
No,
The question of why it
Some people plug these into the dot. I always plug everything like, so I don't.
Please, just give me one. Hey, whistle, sorry. Hey, I got a request. This isn't possible, it's not possible. We have a meeting scheduled on the 23rd, which is 2 weeks from now. Is there any chance that we can move that to the 24th? Would anybody have heartburn over that? Which would move it from Tuesday to Wednesday.
Well, that one was scheduled for the evening.
No, we moved it, we ended up doing it at noon. But we said we're not gonna do the evening. You can't, anytime that's it.
So it's going to the 23rd, 24th?
Yeah, but it's,
And you're right before Rocky Ground, so when you walk.
you could do either. You could do either, Sonny.
I have no problem with that Wednesday. I know I'm gonna be wondering what to grab, but that's okay.
I would like to share.
Wait, just Andrew, wait just 1 minute, please, let me get through this. Cindy, 24th, is that possible for you? Charles?
What's that? I'm sorry.
24th instead of.
That's fine for me.
So Jen's the only one.
Yeah.
And Wendy for sure, it's not, maybe she probably would be here on Tuesday.
For her. I mean, it's interesting to me too, maybe.
This is some gentle density.
Yeah, I feel like there's major confusion about what housing can look like now.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
We are doing next. We are.
I think we just need to have the options, turn the options down, but I mean, taking it off the table.
if that gets built across the street,
Yeah.
it's a triplex. Nobody.
It's beautiful. It's gentle density. Yeah.
And if the problem is, like, here's this affordable housing.
Freak out and they think
about
tenant-
like Detroit.
Yeah. They think about tenement housing.
It's just, that's not what developers are doing.
It's just, I know, and this is just what the,
And they didn't know. I don't trust the developer in the meeting to say it's gonna look like this, because it is nothing like what they said. Not the number of buildings, not the style of buildings, nothing.
I can do 23rd.
That is
going to see.
Rocky Grass. I definitely can't make out. Yeah, that's Rocky Grass starts
oh, right.
May 5th. It's,
Can you do Thursday? Thursday.
it starts Thursday.
Yes, we could have a storm if we do it Thursday, because Jen can. Thursday.
I didn't think that.
We gotta guess.
With that, Thursday, the 25th instead of.
Instead of any other day.
That, do we have a, is that a thumbs up?
Is it 12 to 1? 12 to 1:30.
12:30 to 1:30. 12 to 1:30. We could do it earlier. If somebody wants it earlier.
Yeah,
we'll probably do it.
unfortunately, I have a broader team meeting that's standing. I can't do that.
We're not gonna have a quorum then. that week. So what do you want to do?
It's hard for me that time. So it's just not that.
And
We could even have a forum, but we can't take any action.
I can do
Yeah, just 'cause it's-
11:30 to 11:30 to
Thursday,
But it's.
11:30 to
1.
to
Yes,
1.
I'm-
11:30.
I mean, it's,
to 1:30.
I've got a super hard stop though. I'm gonna get out of here.
We could even do it at 11.
This room.
I'll get it. If not, we'll book the library. The 25th,
Okay.
from like 11
11
to
to 12:30.
12:30. Yeah. And if not, we can probably get it.
That's good for you.
Yeah, that works.
Okay,
Okay.
and I know that doesn't work for you, Wendy, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But And it would work for you, Sonny, right? The 25th. We
Yeah.
did it earlier in the day.
We're gonna shoot for 11.
There's 11 and 12, 11, 12:30 and 25th. Sorry about that, guys. I meant to put that on the agenda and I forgot. Yeah, right. I'll check in with.
We're getting there. It's just uncomfortable process. But it's always.
I don't know why I got into this business.
It's interesting. I mean, you got one of the most interesting topics.
I don't, this is a pain in my head.
Awesome. Thank you, you
Sin City
guys.
as a kid, so.
After 6 years of being on the board,
You're on the board of trustees.
yeah, 3 terms,
Yeah. How long is it?
2
2
years.
Is the board trustees?
Oh, yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's, I mean, no, it can be really contentious too, for sure. Depending on the subject matter. But yeah, it's a lot less.
Oh.
It's more global.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's more global minded and so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As the house.
Yeah.
It's mine.
It's like
You know. it
representative
doesn't-
of this constituency. Yeah.
It's just.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Which is.
What they call it. Which, you know, one developer is not all this.
Yeah.
Specific recommendation, so something's like, okay,
Because.
I'm gonna never be able to afford to buy a home that used to be rent too big. I don't want that inventory to be ugly and affect the environment.
Yeah.
And affect the views that made me the first place to be living. So I had to like meet that out. But I am. And that's why I want to, that's why I think like we need to.
And get people to do it, because other towns do it, and it was nice, or if we could at least trust the style of thing.
Maybe.
Yeah, I would push back about picking one style, at least for lines. I mean, we're supposed to be an eclectic, you know.
And see
Yeah.
their ideal situation. Maybe there's one thing that we can all then.
Yeah.
Now, one thing about that.
Honestly, if this thing is more complicated than 1 or 2 major resolutions, they're gonna be like. Neither one. But it's gonna be more impactful if they hear a consensus with you. As opposed to a.
Yeah, but I mean, that's, yeah.
Thirsty, or stop in our town.
Yeah.
Like it,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just work more cute, right? People stop at cute.
Yeah.
If you want car, you
I don't-
might need a little push.
But I don't think what you all are trying to do is for commerce. Again, you know,
Now,
Yeah.
because of the document, and you can't look at a map separately from the document, because the document is the greatest problem. In my opinion, for me, that's the problem. It's not that the people of Boone do something with their real estate, it's their real estate.
Yeah.
But demanding a certain level of density. That's
You know, I
how
don't-
it's seen, and that's how it reads.
So I guess that's, because I've only been here 4 months.
I don't, like, I worked up, because like, I'm so sick.
No, it's fine, but I guess where I'm at is I've worked in the Mountain West. I've worked in 20 communities, 3 tribal governments. And everybody, Alliance is not unique in this. Everybody's having this discussion. There are communities that are aggressive and truly trying, because we keep talking about community character. And for some reason, what that has turned into, community character, we've dropped the community out, and it's the built environment. We care, it's almost let me finish. So listening to the community, and it's not just Lions, it's a lot of communities. It's about the built form. It has nothing to do with who your neighbors are and who your neighbors are going to be. Because what's going to happen to communities that aren't trying to fix these issues, we're all going to wake up one day and we're not going to, there's nobody that we grew up, none of the neighbors that we have are going to live there. They're all going to turn into short-term rental. Or some wealthy people from Dallas or California are going to come in and they're going to buy it. And that's what's happening. So,
It's like it's a kind of retirement.
Yeah.
People have wanted to live here forever, or they didn't want to come back, and they do.
But that's not Lions. And that's not what is reflected. Being a retirement community is not what's reflected in any planning documents. Yeah.
It's not Lions. None of this is Lions.
What do you mean?
He had unpaved roads in
Oh, yeah.
London. He had no parks in
Sure.
London. He had no people because there were none of the things that have been developed in London. He fought and argued and hated it all. So, people look at that as improvement, and the true Lionites from the center of town lived here when, you know, there wasn't much, well, the kind of business was antique stores because the rent was cheap. Because it was, that was what Lions was.
You got to realize, you know, there's a gentleman, I can't remember his name.
I mean, I'm just telling you, I know it's not Lions. Because I know what Lions was. I used to come here in the 80s.